So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Annual General Meeting of our Association of Medical and Dental Graduates, RCSI, which we will follow by the Sir William Taylor Annual Lecture. And our presenter this evening is Professor Roseanne Kenny, and the topic is Age is Not a Number. So welcome. As you know, the pandemic restrictions made it impossible to have our usual AGM. So our trustees and committee decided to have this virtual AGM with some adjustments, firstly to connect with our graduates worldwide and also to facilitate the transition of the association presidency. And I can assure you that the transition of our presidency is happening promptly, harmoniously and smoothly, unlike some presidents you may have heard of. The usual business of the AGM will be shortened, so instead of reading the minutes of last year's AGM held on the 26th of April 2019 and the reports of the Honorary Secretary and Treasurer, these documents will be available to graduates on request by email, and you can contact us directly at aogrcsi@gmail.com. So that's aogrcsi@gmail.com. But our changed circumstances and necessities due to the COVID-19 pandemic have given us the opportunity to include our graduates from all corners of the earth at this first virtual annual general meeting. So also I see the names arriving, and it's marvelous that we have had over 150 register for this meeting, and literally we're being received in your homes in every continent on the world, and that's marvelous. So it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the Association Committee to welcome each one of you. So here we have the slide of the lovely President's Medal. This is our association, and every medical and dental graduate of RCSI St Stephen's Green, Dublin, is automatically a life member of the association, sharing our unique heritage, professional development and collegiality. We were founded in 1932, so we're now 88 years young. The founding members set out the objectives of the association, which are to forward the interests of the college and its graduates worldwide, to encourage and maintain social and professional contacts between graduates, and to develop and maintain contact between the student body and the graduates of the college. These objectives are as relevant today as in 1932. And we are as committed today to the objectives of the association and to maintaining our distinct identity as were the founding members. Sir William Taylor was one of the founding members, and we're going to hear more about him later. He was the association's first president, and he gifted the beautiful president's medallion that you can see there, which every president proudly wears. Next slide, please. Much more than this, he understood the importance of continued graduate support and solidarity within the profession, and he created our distinct association motto, Floreat Sodalitas Ruat Res, translated as, may our association or solidarity flourish, overcoming all things. Or, if interpreted as, supporting each other, we can overcome difficulties. Again, a timeless sentiment and an aspiration most relevant today. Next slide, please. So keeping all this in mind, I'll give you a resume of the association activities and the events where I, as president, represented us graduates at college events since April 2019. Next slide, please. So the first on the agenda was the conferring dinner on the eve of graduation, May 2019, and here we are presenting our association gold medal to the final year medical student of RCSI Dublin, who has contributed most to the life and work of the class as voted by their classmates, and there in 2019 is Oisin Connaty. Also, the president of the association has the opportunity at the conferring dinner to address the graduands and hopefully give them some words of encouragement and advice. And I think it's a very important function that the president has. Next slide, please. And then we had the conferring of that year, class of 2019, on the 4th of June in the convention centre. And as you can see from the photograph, I think very close to 300 students and were graduated and received their LRCSI, LRCPI, and their MB/BCH. A tremendous number, and far more than for most of us on our graduations was only a fraction of that number. And you see all the lineup of the important people there in the front row, and it truly is a marvelous occasion. Numbers don't permit it to be held in the college anymore. It's held in the convention centre on the North Quays. But again, a tremendous event, and so much family and friendship there. The next slide is where I represented the Association of Medical and Dental Graduates at a commemoration on the 30th of June in St. Patrick's Cathedral, Dublin, for the Royal Army Medical Corps. And I was delighted to be involved and invited to read a lesson at this and to commemorate the 42 fellows, licentiates or graduates, and students who died during serving during World War I. And of course, the hundreds more who served during World War I and in other conflicts, and who continued their service to those millions wounded, injured and scarred, both mentally and physically, for many years after the end of hostilities. And I also laid a wreath at our National Day of Remembrance and on Armistice Day in November. Next slide, please. The reunion and gathering was held on the 22nd to the 24th of August 2019, and as usual, we all know every 5 years our birthdays, and it does actually feel like a tremendous, gigantic birthday party with so many familiar faces and so many family connections and friendships spreading over decades. And truly, we are unique as a medical school. I think our loyalty and our commitment to coming back and renewing our friendships and our links with the college is truly exceptional. So it's always a marvelous event. And both last year, 2019, and the year before, there were upwards of 300 graduates returning. So it's a big event. We've had to move the gala dinner to the Mansion House again due to numbers. And as you know, we also have a scientific meeting and a service of remembrance and thanksgiving. But also we have the lunch for the golden and diamond jubilarians. And this is again a marvelous event. And as you can see here, the class of 1959 celebrating 60 years and the class of 1969 celebrating 50 years. And they receive a parchment at a lovely ceremony in the college hall. Next slide, please. We then have our gala dinner on the Saturday, and of course prior to that, the golf competition for our Prendeville Cups. And then we have the presentation of the Distinguished Graduate Award, a really unique award which has so many recipients of enormous quality and who have really made a difference in their work and their commitment to looking after other people. And Kate Coleman, whom most of you know, was the recipient in 2019 and made a marvelous acceptance speech. So that was the Distinguished Graduate Award in 2019. So we moved on then to the November conferring, and I feel it's particularly important that the November conferring, the medical graduates there, about 25, I think, medical graduates. I was represented by the Vice President, Patrick Troy, at the conferring, and I suppose it's a smaller, more intimate affair, and I was just concerned that we would remember those who had their conferring in November also. They're just as much part of their class of 2019. Next slide, please. So then it comes to party time, and our association annual dinner was held on the 23rd of November. Again, it's been every year for the last few years, it's been a sellout. We're full to the brim, and the photograph you see there is before excited and dare I say inebriated later on. They were all very well behaved there. And we welcomed guests of honour who you see there, the Student Union President, Javed Makian, Vice President RCSI, Professor Ronan O'Connell, representing the President, and my own classmate, Dr. Pádraig McGarry, my year of 1982, who is President of the Irish Medical Organisation. And also, not in the photograph, but a guest of honour was Mr. Justice Peter Kelly, President of the High Court. So, unfortunately, this year, of course, we couldn't have the annual dinner. And thinking about when we get back to some normality, really this is something that perhaps we could package it into a week's holiday in Dublin for our graduates who mightn't be celebrating their reunion year on that year. So we hope to get back up and running next year, certainly, and would encourage everybody to support it. Next slide, please. Now, a really momentous occasion happened in December 2019, and that was the passing of an act in the Oireachtas, the Parliament, to confer the university status on RCSI. And it really represents the culmination of so many years of hard work, dedication, and a vision for the future that I think started probably in the 1960s with Harry O'Flanagan and moved on a pace from there. And it really is a credit to all those who have contributed over so many years and who have worked hard, all people to do with the college, the academic staff, the administrators, the research departments, and the leadership of Professor Cathal Kelly as Registrar and CEO has really made this happen. And I think we owe him a huge debt of gratitude for his Trojan efforts culminating in this. And I think it is really, possibly after the foundation of the college, it must be the next most momentous happening. Also, as you know, about 2 years ago, the new building on 26 York Street was opened with its marvellous facilities. And we in the association hope to present a work of art to commemorate this great occasion and the opening of the 26 York Street. So we're working on that, and we hope to have that happen next year. Also, just to say that it was a marvellous to achieve university status. And then as president, I represented us graduates at the Charter Day dinner in February 2020. And of course, this is a great annual event. There's a week of a number of days of scientific meetings and surgical training conferences. And then it culminates in a dinner on the Saturday night to celebrate and to commemorate the granting of a charter to the college in 1784. And I thought it was interesting. We went from December 2019, the 21st century, back to commemorating our founding in 1784. Just shows the continuum and how dynamic the college has been and continues to be. So again, just to say that I think Professor Cathal Kelly certainly deserves all our gratitude for the tremendous work he did in achieving this. Next slide, please. Actually, there's a mistake here. This should not be the extraordinary class of 2020 just yet. It really should be the next slide, which is the gathering in London. So could we have the next slide and then go back? So in the past few years, our graduate colleague and indeed distinguished graduate awardee, Ara Darzai, or correctly, the Professor, the Lord Darzai of Denham, has hosted a reception in the House of Lords, and we are very grateful to him for his generosity and giving his time and organisation for this. I think at this point we nearly think we have shares in the House of Lords. It's a tremendous event, very well supported, and in the last 2 years, both March of 2020 and February 2019, we in the association organised a supper afterwards in the Caledonian Club because, well, people were hungry and they wanted to continue the great chat and everything. So both events are sellout events. And again, we hope that perhaps next year we will be able to have some similar event, if not at that same time. But again, a marvelous event and a great way of meeting up with our graduate colleagues. And as I say, if when it does happen again, you want to book early to avoid disappointment. So if we can go back to the extraordinary class of 2020. So we were very glad to have our lovely party in London on the 6th of March, because the following week it was lockdown, or virtual lockdown anyway. And then the college had to close. And then the most extraordinary thing happened. It was the class of 2020, and if you can remember back to your own days, in March you were getting seriously concerned about your finals, but they were going to happen in May. But in order for the logistics of the whole thing, the extraordinary circumstances, it was put to the class of 2020 that they would have to, or if they would agree to take their final exams early. And they actually agreed to take their final exams 7 weeks ahead of schedule. An extraordinary thing. I think it would have flummoxed most of us if we were at that stage. And they really rose up to the mark, and it was hectic, but it happened anyway. And I was invited to speak to share some of the essence of the results day and the significance of that, and also although it was not a substitute for conferring, but I think it was a virtual conferring that they had. They've been promised another one, but they really came up to the mark for that. So we also didn't present, but we awarded our association gold medal to the final year medical student of Conor Mulvin. And we've had, I think it was an event, and it was a way in which we could possibly contribute more and be seen to be more supportive of our young graduates. So we moved on then to the virtual reunion gathering, which we had to have virtually as well, and that was in August. I have to say it was great production. I think it was a good substitute, but not enough for the real thing. And it took a lot of production, but I think it was rewarded, because I know that there were 1,600 graduates linked in and attended the various online events. We always have a service of remembrance and thanksgiving, which we believe is a very important part of the reunion gathering. And we do, of course, remember all our graduates and celebrate their contributions. We don't ever specifically mention names. In fact, we don't even mention God. But on this occasion, we did mention, next slide, please, someone, although not a graduate, who was so much part of the college for so very long. That is the late Terry Slattery, mace bearer and head porter. And he played such an important role in so many of our lives and time in RCSI. He was a great ambassador for the college, and his heart and soul was in the college, and he set a very great example for mace bearers and head porters to come, and we truly miss him. So it was lovely to be able to celebrate him and to commemorate him. So the next slide, please. We had already decided on our Distinguished Graduate Award of 2020, and it came as no surprise, I would think, that Professor Maura O'Brien, incredibly the class of 1956, still practicing, who has made an enormous contribution to her field of anatomy and of sports medicine and osteoporosis, received our Distinguished Graduate Award. And we really had a marvelous, very, very small gathering, as you can see, and extremely distant, but presented her with the award in the boardroom. And the citation was read by Dr. Mary Archer, her colleague, and it was a lovely event. Sadly, couldn't be enjoyed in person, but it was a substitute. Next slide, please. So now that concludes my report for the year, and I'd like to ask Ms. Amanda Brown to briefly give a shortened version of the Treasurer's report.
Thanks, Antonia. Hello, everyone. I'm going to give a very brief summary of the Treasurer's report. The time frame for this report is really from April 2019 to the end of March 2020, which can officially now be known as the days of yore, when everything was relatively normal. The year in question, we had a number of great events. I think Antonia's mentioned most of them already, but the annual Association Black Tie Dinner, a very popular and well-attended event, which in the past has been heavily subsidised by the association. But I'm happy to report that from a Treasurer's point of view anyway, that our subsidy is steadily decreasing over the last couple of years and heading hopefully to us breaking even maybe next year. Please God, as they say. The Caledonia Club, again, another very popular event, and Antonia's right, they did sell out 2 years in a row within 3 hours. We're happy to subsidise a very small amount for this event, and the reason we do this is to keep ticket prices quite reasonable, which is good. Both these events, if you haven't attended them, definitely keep it in mind when they reappear on the scene. They're well worth a visit, absolutely. So the other outgoings then we have would include the Clubs and Societies Prize, which we give annually. This was recently increased from €750 to a prize of €1,000, and the worthy winners were the Drama Society, and I think they put the €1,000 to great use actually. And our charitable donation for the year was Practitioners Health, and they received €2,000 from us. And this is a charity that gives confidential healthcare to any doctor, dentist, or pharmacist in Ireland concerned about mental health or substance misuse. So before the orchestra starts to play loudly to get rid of me, all that is left for me to say is that the association accounts are in good stead. And also importantly, if anybody has any questions or wishes to see the full report, please feel free to contact us on the email that Antonia gave, aogrcsi@gmail.com, I think. And that's it. Many thanks. Back to you now, Antonia.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you for all your great work during the year. I'd also like to thank our acting Honorary Secretary, Maura Briscoe, but she won't be giving a report, but I'd like to thank them for their work anyway. So it comes to the thank you session, and as you know, I'm coming to the end of my term. So really, I want to thank a number of people and groups of people who have made my job actually feasible and doable and have been of tremendous help to me. So first of all, our hard-working committee. We all give our time freely, and I appreciate the contributions of all of the members of the committee and the members of the committee for the last few years also. The officers are the President-elect, Patrick Troy, our acting Honour Secretary, Maura Briscoe, and Amanda, who you've heard from. I would also like to thank our trustees, Mr. Hy Brown, FRCSI, and Professor W.A.L. McGowan, FRCSI, who are invaluable as in my role giving very good advice. And I also relied on our past presidents very much, who always were generous in their support and advice. Of course, we couldn't operate without the alumni relations team, and that is led by Anya Gibbons, but in particular Laura Sherlock, who I can only describe as she's a one-woman multitasking department, and she does the work of a number of people, dozens of people as far as I can see, and she really has her heart and soul in her job, and we are so appreciative of everything she does. They were supposed to have their photographs up here, but I think they were so late in the hairdressers that it couldn't be done. Also, we were joined in March by Caoimhe Ní Neal, is an executive in the Alumni Relations, and Caoimhe wasn't literally, she was not a wet week in the place when it locked down. So she had an awful lot of learning, which wasn't easy, but she has been a great help, and she has, I think she's seeing the sort of extra life of RCSI, and I think she will be a great help to us. She's been a great help, and she will be in the future. And also to mention the RCSI, as I call them, the house and home team, particularly our head porter, Frank Donegan, and his team, because they are literally the front line. They're the front of house. They help so much in the lives of the students and of all the people working here in RCSI, but particularly I think they are the friendly face. I think we all remember during our time in college all the help that they gave, and I would particularly like to thank them for all their work. So, but most of all, if I can thank you and my colleagues and our fellow graduates for all the help and support and for the encouragement. So I'm now going to hand over. We did a virtual handover of the chain of office, and I would like to call on the President-elect, Dr. Patrick Troy. And I know that Patrick will work hard, and I know that he will be the safe pair of hands for all our representation and for the work of the association. And thank you, Patrick. You've been a support to me, and I hope I will be a support to you as well. So thank you, everybody. If I've forgotten to mention someone, I'm truly sorry. So I would ask you now to please raise a glass to our new president, Patrick Troy.
Thank you, Antonio. Before we proceed, I would like to thank Antonio, for her tireless work on behalf of the medical and dentalist graduates of the college. She's raised the profile of the association in Ireland and indeed abroad, and she set the bar very high for all future presidents, including me. I would like to say it is an honour and a privilege for me to be nominated as president of the Association of Medical and Dental Graduates, RCSI. I thank the committee for their nomination and their confidence in me, and I pledge to uphold the Constitution and to work for the betterment of the association. Next slide, please. Due to COVID, of course, the AGM could not be actually held in April of this year. However, all the executive officers and all the committee members have agreed to remain on the committee until the AGM in April 2021. And of course, that is COVID permitting. Now we move to the Societies and Clubs Award. As all medical graduates of the RCSI become lifelong members of the association on graduation, the association seeks to give a little help to the students as they travel through their education by way of supporting their chosen activities. These awards are in the form of a grant and are made to that club or society that the committee feels offers most imaginative, aspirational and inclusivity within the undergraduate body, and to assist and to select club or society fulfill its goals or dreams. The award of €1,000 in 2009 went to the Drama Society, also called the Royal Players. RCSI Drama is one of the oldest societies in the college. The society prides itself on introducing hard-working students who have no prior acting experience to the stage. Darren Gilheany, the president of the society, admits he still has a distance to travel to become a convincing actor, yet he relishes the opportunity to remove himself from his comfort zone and overcome the fear of the stage. I would now like to call on Darren Gilheany just to speak a little of the society and their activities for the year.
Hello.
Yes, Darren.
Hi. First of all, thanks for inviting me to speak. It's a long time thinking back to the dinner in 2019 when we were given the award, but just thanks for inviting me back, and good job so far and everything that's been done in the past year with everything going on. So yeah, I'll keep it brief. Just to say that we are very thankful for the grant that we were given. We made sure we put it to good use. As Patrick was saying there, our society is a little bit different to other colleges in that nobody claims to be an elite actor. I'd say nearly 100% of the people in the society would claim to be very amateur, but we enjoy it just as much, if not more, because we use it as an outlet to do things that we wouldn't get to do in college at the expense of our academic activities. So when we got the €1,000 grant, we were in a position where we had started to really improve the society and make our events much more larger scale, and we're getting a lot more people involved. So we built on that, and one of the things we said we would do with the grant was to invest in a public speaking workshop for students, because we felt that while the drama itself and acting and just being out of your comfort zone is very enjoyable, there's really something to be said for being able to stand up confidently and speak aloud and be convincing. And it really is a trait that most students want to have, but very few will actually admit to having, including myself. So we wanted to give students a chance to practice tricks and cues and ways to come across more confident, so they can build their own confidence in the meantime. And this is particularly useful in our course when a lot of our exams in the later years are OSCE exams, where you have to be convincing, look confident, and look like you know what you're talking about. So we did that workshop. We got some of the staff from the Trinity College Theatre and Drama Department to come up, and they gave a group of students I think it was a couple of hours long workshop. And in terms of the feedback, it was very good. We got a lot of different comments. Some just said that they found it very enjoyable, they had good crack doing it. And then some people said that it really gave them the chance to practice just standing up confidently and speaking aloud and getting used to the sound of their own voice and believing in what they were saying and being convincing speaking to other people. So we're very glad that we were able to actually implement that workshop, because we do feel it benefited the students. In terms of the rest of the grant, because it's a very large grant, we used it to further improve the theatrical side of the society. So we invested in, for the first time in, I don't think the society has ever had them, but we got radio mics for the musical, which were much better than the previous years. So slowly but surely the productions are becoming much more professional, and they're still selling out. They're still packing out 480 seats each night. Unfortunately, we weren't able to have it this year due to COVID. But even the fact that people were sad about it and people were they missed the fact that they didn't have a musical, just goes to show that this is slowly becoming a thing that everybody in the college is involved in, whether you're not involved in drama and you're just going to watch your friends, or you're getting involved and you're doing it for the first time. So yeah, I just want to echo what Patrick said about the inclusivity. It really does include everyone in the college, and everyone does take a skill away from being in the drama society, whether it be acting or something else, or even just friendship with people you wouldn't have met otherwise. So overall, thanks again, and it really is a privilege to have accepted the award and put it to use. And it was also very nice to get to speak to some of the alumni who I myself will be joining in a couple of months' time. So just thanks again for everything.
Thank you very much, Darren, and indeed always use your speaking talents to spread the good word of the association, because we would like to be as integrated to the students as possible. Now, the next award, the award for 2020, went to the Southeast and East Asian Society, and this was due to their excellent presentation that encouraged inclusivity of students and RCSI staff in cultural and social areas and also personal development. Their version is a society run by students for students to establish better relationships between communities where students can work and integrate together in a harmonious environment. The society was selected from 10 excellent submissions made by the clubs and societies. I now grant €1,000 to President Ming Chun Chong of SEA, and I hope she will tell us a little about SEA and, and ask that they would actually return to give the association an update of their society at some time in the future. And I hope President Ming is there.
My name is Ming and I'm president of CSAW. On behalf of CSAW, we are pleased, honored, and humbled to accept this grant. A very special thank you to the Association of Medical and Dental Graduates of RCSI. CSAW is Southeast and East Asian Society. We are a cultural society with the goal of celebrating and spreading culture within the diverse student body of RCSI. This year, the pandemic halted all in-person events. Hence, we hope to use this grant to invest in long-term purchases such as new cultural costumes, a new line dance set, etc., to deliver the best events in coming years post-pandemic, hopefully in terms of culture and education as well to benefit the students. It is with great pleasure that CSAW receives this grant. Thank you so much once again, and we look forward to delivering the report with our progress next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ming. It's a pity we didn't actually see the video, but thank you very much anyway for your contribution. And we hope that you will return and let us know how your society got on during the year. Next slide now, please. Now we move on to the charitable donations. Every year, the Association of Medical and Dental Graduates make a donation to a charity of their choosing. Throughout the year, various charities come to mind, and all are considered until one is chosen. This year we have decided to donate €2,000 to the Order of Malta and €1,000 to Women's Aid. If feasible, we invite the recipients to return and inform the association of the workings of their charity and indeed the benefit of the donations. The business element of the AGM is now over, and we now proceed with the educational and entertainment part of the AGM. The Sir William Taylor Lecture will be given by Professor Roseanne Kenny. However, before the lecture, I would like to call upon Dr. Antonia Lennon, she's the immediate past president now, to tell us about Sir William Taylor. Apart from being a past graduate of RCSI, who was William Taylor?
Thank you, Patrick. I'm conscious of the time and I don't want to hold up our speaker very much, but I would like to share with you just a very short biography and tell some of the story of William Taylor. And I'd like to acknowledge Sir Peter Froggett and Joseph Harbison and others who have researched his life and who published. Many of our graduates become leaders in their field and have outstanding achievements. But with the passage of time, some have been overlooked. And learning about their lives, challenges and achievements, I believe, inspires future generations of doctors and also shows how history repeats itself. William Taylor was the son of a mill owner and farmer and was born in September 1871 in the small town of Castlefin, County Donegal. He was educated in nearby Strabane, riding to school each day on his pony. Although he had ability, he showed little interest in schoolwork and was encouraged to look to the wider world. And he enrolled in the RCSI Medical School, Dublin, in 1889. He concurrently attended Trinity College, a practice not uncommon at that time. In both establishments, and these are from contemporary reports, he was regarded as an exceptional student of high intellect and inexhaustible and skillful application. Taylor was awarded first prize in medicine and surgery at Trinity College in 1892, And in 1893, he won the prestigious gold medal in operative surgery at RCSI. And his name is up there in the gold letters on the the board at the back of the corridor beside the anatomy room. He qualified as a licentiate of RCSI and RCPI on the 27th of July, 1893, still only 21 years of age. He began his clinical career as house surgeon in the Meath Hospital, Dublin, in Dublin's inner city, and this association would last over 20 years. There was no shortage of work because there was appalling living conditions and poverty for the majority of Dubliners at that time. Taylor was recognised for his competence, hard work and practical skills, and he obtained fellowship of RCSI in 1898. There followed appointments as consulting surgeon to a number of other Dublin hospitals, and he was regarded as the progressive young leader of surgical practice in Dublin. At the opening of the session of the Meath Hospital in October 1901, Taylor delivered an important address on modern progress in surgery. He predicted the international development of specialization in surgery, the possibilities of anesthesia, and he advocated what we would now describe as centres of excellence. In the decade that followed, Taylor built up an extensive surgical practice, pioneering successful techniques in asepsis, especially in abdominal surgery. He communicated with colleagues abroad and was active in undergraduate teaching and in surgical training in Ireland. Contemporary accounts describe him as honest, but outspoken and direct, and not always on easy terms with colleagues. One has the sense that he did not suffer fools and had no time for pretension. Despite this, he was, however, elected to the Council of the Royal College of Surgeons, becoming Vice President in 1914 and finally President in 1916. And you see him here in his portrait photograph. He is in military uniform. He never sat for a portrait, and I believe he's the only president of the college who never had his portrait painted. And he's there in military uniform. You'll see that the photographer there, the corner, is Lafayette, and they are still the official photographers to the college. At the outbreak of World War I, Mr. Taylor was appointed consulting surgeon and colonel to the forces in Ireland, and was involved in the Dublin Castle Red Cross Hospital. And he began actively recruiting Irish doctors to the war effort. He was in northern France in June 1916, observing and inspecting medical services for the injured. He was asked to manage and organise staff for the 83rd General Base Hospital near Boulogne, which was the largest of the base hospitals. And you see here where it was in Boulogne, and there's a picture of a ward. He accepted this role with enthusiasm and dedicated himself to the task. A later quote was that, "From beginning to end, Taylor was its life and inspiration." And he certainly applied some innovations to the work of the hospital. He had great success recruiting Irish doctors, and decided to have doctors would serve for 3 to 4 months, a relatively short period of time, so it didn't disrupt their work, and they were fresh and they weren't exhausted at the end of a long term of serve. The improved care for the patients was noted, and it became known familiarly as the Dublin Hospital. It also led the way in many areas at this time, given that, of course, the facilities and medications and things we take for granted now were not available to them then. They also treated some of the most horrific injuries which were sustained by unfortunate soldiers during the war. They led the way in the treatment of maxillofacial injuries, eye injuries, and they were the first hospital to have an early rehabilitation unit, recognizing both physical and mental injuries. In the lead up to the end of hostilities in November 1918, the hospital had another role, which was, of course, treating people who had Spanish flu, as it had begun to spread in mid-1918. And it continued its work after the end of hostilities and after repatriating some patients because of the Spanish flu well into 1919. Taylor returned to Dublin and was most involved at that time in the rehabilitation and care of servicemen, and he was really dedicated to that job. He was the contacts he made in his work in the Boulogne Dublin Hospital led to his international recognition and cooperation and development in surgery. He visited America and Canada and was very well recognized for his contribution and his skill. Of course, in Ireland at that time, it was a very difficult time. There was a war of independence and then a civil war. And as a unionist, it must have been difficult for Taylor to witness the partition of Ireland and the emergence of the state. Due to his connections and his work, I think you could say the world was his oyster. He could have developed his career anywhere, in Britain, in America, Canada, but he chose to stay in Ireland and dedicate himself to Dublin and to the care and surgical treatment there. And again, a number of quotes. William J. Mayo of the Mayo Clinic, in speaking of a visit to Dublin in 1923, wrote of Sir William as a gifted teacher and surgeon, and detailed some of his innovative surgical techniques. It's also said that, quote is, few men can have combined so many important posts or acquitted themselves in their multifarious obligations with greater ability. He did recognize the importance of the support of colleagues in the practice of medicine. And I think this was reflected in his involvement in founding our association. He dedicated himself in the 1920s to many educational and professional bodies based in Ireland and for the betterment of health for all our people. So I would like to say that he's been slightly forgotten, and I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to him and can learn from his example. And I hope that we will produce a more extensive biography, which will be published next year in the Alumni magazine. So without further ado, I will hand you back to our president now, Patrick. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. That was wonderful. Now, it gives me great pleasure to announce our speaker tonight. Professor Kenny has multiple accolades, far too to mention here. However, in brief, Roseanne Kenny is Professor of Medical Gerontology in Trinity College Dublin, a Director of the Falls and Blackout Unit in St. James's Hospital, Dublin, and is also Director of the Mercer's Institute for Successful Aging. She has 4 fellowships: Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland, London, Edinburgh, and Trinity, and she's in membership of the Royal Irish Academy. She is the principal investigator for the TILDA project, and this is an Irish longitudinal study on aging. This research study is now in its 12th year, and it looks at the health, lifestyles, and financial situation of people as they grow older. Her research also incorporates cardiovascular and mobility issues. The title of the lecture is called Age is Not a Number, and it's over to you, Roseanne.
Now, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can certainly hear you, Roseanne.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for this great honor. I'm delighted to be addressing you all this evening. And I hope by the time I finish speaking, I will have convinced you that age is not a number and that you and we can manipulate biological aging with just a little willpower and some knowledge about and an understanding of the aging process, so that as individuals and as societies, we can ensure that we live healthier, longer lives, but also that health, social and economic consequences of our aging society will enjoy a better world in which to age. Now, I want to acknowledge that I've done some of this work, although I'm based in Trinity, with a number of colleagues in the college in RCSI. Hannah McGee in the first instance, who is your dean now, James O'Donnell, who runs your vascular unit, Annie Curtis, who does all the sleep lab work, and Tom Fahey, who's professor of general practice. So I think it's not possible to reflect on biological aging and what's happening without looking at the unbelievable changes that have occurred in life expectancy over time. And this is a trajectory of the last 200 years. And during that period of time, average life expectancy has doubled in most developed countries. That equates to an increase of about 2.2 years every 10 years, or 3 months every year. And as you can see, the graph is linear, so it's continuing. We're living longer. Now, there are a host of different reasons for this. Believe it or not, we're under less stress. Our economic and social environments are much, much better than they used to be. Of course, advances in health and in medicines, and also in health behaviors and health awareness. This is where we are in the context of the proportion of populations aged 60 and older in 2015. So in 2015, in terms of the proportion of the population over 60, Japan is the only country which has 30% or more over 60. 25 to 29, we have a lot of European countries are hitting that target. 20 to 24, big land masses now coming into those proportions. And then, of course, these are the emerging economies, aging economies. But look what's going to happen in 2050. In 30 years' time, these are the continents or countries which will have in excess of 1/3 of the population over the age of 60. And actually, the fastest growing proportion in those populations are the over 80s, including in Ireland. We're actually ranked 19th in the world in terms of life expectancy. Japan is, of course, the highest. Let's look at that a little bit more detail. So Japan is number one, and has pretty much consistently been number one for over a decade now, with a life expectancy for both sexes of 83, for women of 87 almost, and men 81. And there is still a gender gap in expectancy. Women on average do live longer, but that gap is narrowing, particularly in higher socioeconomic groups. Here we are down here, Ireland, number 19. And the first thing I know you're asking yourself when looking at this graph is, well, why are we? What's so different about us compared to Switzerland, Singapore, Australia, Spain, Iceland, Italy, Israel, Sweden? Why are they living longer? France, South Korea, Canada, Luxembourg, etc. Our life expectancy for women is 83 and for men 79. And part of what we're doing in the longitudinal study and aging groups around the world is trying to understand what are the factors which determine this discrepancy in life expectancy by doing comparative studies across harmonized data sets worldwide. And then once we have that understanding, can we manipulate those risk factors to extend healthy life expectancy, because that's what all of our goals are as researchers, but also from a policy perspective, extend healthy life expectancy and just make this extended life expectancy a good quality period of life. There is huge heterogeneity, which comes back to age not being a number, huge heterogeneity in the way we age. And this is just one indication of that. This is age here on in this axis, and this is the time it takes to walk a fixed distance of, say, 6 meters. So at age 50, most of us perform, this is a 1,000 odd people in the Tilda study, most of us perform this function at the same rate. In other words, we walk that fixed distance in the same period of time, pretty much. At 85, there's a much bigger spread of how long that takes. Big at 80, big at 75, but you can see as we get beyond 50, 55 and 60, the spread of how we perform in this simple speed of walking task changes hugely. But hey, look at this. There are people aged 85, 25%, who are performing at the same speed as those aged 50. So what's determining that? What's determining that biological marker, the speed at which we walk? And believe it or not, it's one of the strongest markers we have for biological aging. What's determining that versus a chronological number? And when does it kick in? When does this difference in biology and chronology start? This is fabulous work from colleagues in New Zealand, the Dunedin study, where they have taken a cohort of people born in a certain year who are now 44 and followed them up every few years with a huge array of different tests and questions to understand their biological aging, both health, social and economic, exactly the same as we're doing in the Tilda study, but they started at birth and everybody was born in the same year. And now everybody is the same chronological age. When they did this study, all of their participants were aged 38. And then they measured their biological aging. And there are lots of ways of doing that, including epigenetic clocks that I'll touch on in a moment. But we have ways of measuring biological age. But look at this. Everybody's the same chronological age. But biologically, there's a huge difference. Some of these 38-year-olds were performing biologically almost like 50-year-olds. Others were performing like people in their late 30s. So a 20-year biological difference in these participants who were all the same age. And what was driving that? And they found that there was a host of factors driving it, but they were mostly related to adverse childhood experiences. Either poor household, poor socioeconomic circumstances, poor education, bad lifestyle behaviors, alcohol in the house, disruption in the house, disharmony in a house, sickness in a house, abuse, etc. They were the factors which made the differences in chronological and biological aging. And when they looked at all of the other physiological parameters, including hormonal parameters, neurological parameters, etc., they found that in all of those organ-specific details or neurotransmitter or protein-specific details, the pace of aging was the same, so that when there was accelerated biological aging, it actually was reflected in all of the organs and all of the systems. It didn't discriminate one. So it was a total body, if you like, accelerated pace of aging as a result of these adverse events. And this is something that's very striking from a societal perspective. This is looking at life expectancy, because that's the kind of hard currency that you can judge age with, how long somebody lives, apart from looking at biological aging. And looking at life expectancy and how it maps when adjusted for all other confounders with education. These are people across Europe. These are Eurostat data who have only level 0 to level 2, our equivalent primary school. These are people with level 3, 4, our equivalent secondary school. And this is everybody who's still listening to this lecture. All of you are third level graduates. And your life expectancy is significantly higher than those who have achieved just primary level or secondary level education. And this is consistently so in all societies. And this was so for Eurostat data from 2007 through to 2016. Now, the slope of this curve is steeper than this and this, meaning that the lower educated groups, their pace of, or their longevity is improving faster and better than we are, but actually these have kind of plateaued out a little bit now, but these are catching up. So education, the message here, is hugely important for life expectancy. Okay, why do we age? What causes biological aging, etc.? I'm sure we're all clinicians, and you've all experienced the 75-year-old sitting in front of you, drinks the bit out, smokes the bit out, and you're trying to give lifestyle advice, and he says, "Doctor, you don't have to worry about me at all. My father lived till he was 90, and my mother, she was 93. I'm fine." Well, no. Genes only contribute to 20% of lifespan. At least that is so up until 75, 80. If you make it to 80, then genes play a huge role in the additional life years after that. But up until 75, 80, genes only contribute to 20% of lifespan. The big determinant is environmental factors. These are the things we and society can modify. They actually influence 80% of how long we're going to live. Now, what happens in a cell that it gets old? And then we'll look at that first quickly, and then we'll look at what are the factors that we can control to modify. It's really basic. It's all about toxins accumulating in cells. And the reason that, well, the reason the cell is there in the first instance, and it's got this fantastic complex array of functions, from nucleus, which is its DNA library, to mitochondria, which is the powerhouse that creates energy in the cell. The reason we're there is that energy. The cell produces energy from food, and that keeps the cell alive. That allows the cell to replicate and reproduce, and that allows us to continue functioning and living. The two big organs with respect to this are DNA in the nucleus and the mitochondria, the powerhouse. But as energy is produced, toxins are produced. And the cell has an onus on it to get rid of those toxins as fast as possible. So from food, we get energy via the mitochondria, produces toxins, get rid of them fast. That's a really delicate balance within a cell. It's when that balance becomes unstable and imbalanced that changes start to happen in the cell which promote aging. Now, there are a number of theories about why cells age. The accumulation of toxins that we've just discussed, genetics that we've just discussed. We're programmed to age. So when you're born, you're given a number, 82, hopefully 92 for Paddy Troy, 102. We're given a number. This theory is much less popular now than any of the others. Protein cross-linking, you know, the way we get fibrosis in the lungs, for example, or collagen cross-linking in skin, etc., other tissues. Maybe that's what's doing it. Inflammaging, this is the hot topic at the moment, and actually most of these trigger inflammation in a cell, and a lot of our groups are now working on inflammation within the cell as the trigger. Free radical theory, so part of that balance in energy production and toxin release, part of those toxins that are released can be free radicals, and of course the supplement industry has capitalized on this. Antioxidants, etc. Supplements which are antioxidants and counteract the negative influences of free radical accumulation in the cell. Truth is, it's probably a combination of these theories, but nonetheless, the factors we're going to quickly discuss now, which influence cell aging, actually impact on all of these potential theories. I love this slide. It nicely illustrates how long different animals live for, including ourselves, the human here. So these are years here, and these, of course, are the different animals. And the basic message here is that size of animal, generally speaking, the bigger the animal, the longer they live, with notable exceptions. Box turtle lives about 130 years. A giant tortoise, 150 years. Lifespan is determined by our basal metabolic rate, which is what's going on in the mitochondria of the cell in terms of energy production. And that is directly related in most animals to heart rate. And those two things determine how long we live for, lifespan. So I'll give you a really good example of that in the shrew. And what's fun about this example is it explains to you how we got the expression to be shrewd. So this is the shrew, one of the smallest mammals that there is. It weighs 4 grams. It lives 6 months, sometimes 12 months. It's unusual. It has a very, very high metabolic rate. And the reason for that is our metabolic rate is the surface to volume ratio in a body. So the higher the surface to volume ratio, the higher the metabolic rate and heart rate has to be to generate sufficient energy to keep the core temperature normal. So this little devil only lives for 6 months. Its heart rate is 600 beats per minute. Compare that to ours, significantly more than ours. Now, it's obviously very interesting from that respect. What it does is it has to eat every couple of minutes. If it doesn't keep eating insects, it will die. But what it does have is a venom. So it can actually inject this venom into whatever animal or insect it's caught, and it keeps the animal alive but paralyzed for anything up to 15 days. So that's how it manages to have a store of food to accommodate with its high metabolic rate. Compare that with the naked mole rat, which Google have invested millions in. This is almost the same size as the shrew, but it lives for up to 30 years. It has a similar basal metabolic rate and heart rate, but it lives much longer because it doesn't seem to get the same spill of toxins with time and basal metabolic rate from the mitochondria. And of course, that is of huge interest. The pigeon is another animal that shares that lack of spilling from the mitochondria. So just keep that in mind. That's something that's being studied in terms of if we could understand what's going on in the mitochondrial membrane that's preventing that spill and modify our human cells to replicate that, we can all live 30 years longer. Twins are an amazing way to study humans. Animals, of course, are used a lot in age-related studies, but twins are a fantastic resource. These are the chromosomes from 3-year-old identical twins, very similar. But look at the 50-year-old identical twins, and you can appreciate that the distribution of green and yellow and orange, etc., is very different. And these are those twins. This twin smoked and liked sunlight and a lot, was divorced and had a lot of stress in her life. This twin didn't, but she does look like she needs to go on a diet. But apart from that, so genes and twins and shared genes, shared environment, shared age and sex offer a fantastic natural experiment for us to understand the aging process in the contents of social and health exposures which drive biological aging, thinking back to the Dunedin study and those premature aging changes. And those social and health exposures include occupation, education, marital status, lifespan adversities, and illnesses, medication, and accidents, etc. All of those things drive biological aging. This is work we're doing with King's. So, is there a way that we could actually take blood samples or something and almost like commercialize measures of aging so that we can predict almost exactly, if we continue as we are, how long we're going to live? And there are things called epigenetic clocks. There was the first generation clocks, Horvath and Hannam's clocks. They don't perform that well actually in terms of that walking speed test we looked at earlier on, which is a really good measure of predicted mortality and comorbidities. They don't do so good. The second generation clocks, phenotype and dreadful name, Grim Age clock, actually they perform much better, particularly grim age, in terms of predicting walking speed. And now we've looked at it with Steve Horvath, actually, who described the grim age clock and shown that it's actually coupling nicely with predicted mortality as well. So the second generation biological clocks are proving more interesting, and they've introduced clinical biomarkers. But now what we're doing is we're looking at the life course biomarkers, like at what time in our lifespan did different events happen, and building those into the model. And that's actually proving very much more predictive in terms of lifespan and when you get illnesses as you age. Something that's really informed our understanding of aging are the blue zones. Now, these are zones in California, Costa Rica, Italy, Greece, and Japan, where people not only live longer, but they live better. A higher proportion than anywhere else of people live over 90 and indeed to 100. They have the highest proportion of centenarians in the world. But really important is they don't suffer from chronic diseases, which we commonly see in industrialized worlds. So of course these are the longevity hotspots that have been the focus of research. And what are the factors that are different about these hotspots compared to our worlds? Well, they're all by the sea and they're all mountainous. That's the first thing. The way they take physical activity there is very different. I mean, there's no jumping into the car and going to the gym for an hour. Physical activity is actually embedded in their daily activity, in their lives. They do a lot of gardening, housework, walk everywhere, etc. So physical activity, rather than it be a purposeful activity, is actually part of their lifestyles. Their diets are different, and I'll talk about that in a moment. They have a great belonging, a great community, and we'll address that also in a moment, and extended families with whom they're very close. They do downtime. They actually have dedicated periods, all of them, each day for downtime. The Sardinians enjoy wine and an afternoon siesta, as do the Greek. Japan has afternoon tea, etc. California, the Loma Linda community pray together every afternoon, and Costa Rica also enjoys wine and a period of time of sleep, siesta, in the afternoon. So they all purposefully do downtime each day. But in those who aren't sleeping, maybe this does happen when they're sleeping, but in those generally who aren't sleeping, they're discussing, sharing problems, engaging with each other over a glass of wine or in Okinawa tea. And they have a purpose. Some of them even have a specific word for having a purpose each day, giving your day meaning. And even though they're 100 and over, these centenarians, they still have a sense of purpose in their day. It's remarkable how important that is for biological well-being. So the extrinsic factors, the environmental factors that influence the pace of aging, how slowly or fast our biology ages, and also, interestingly, enhance our immune system because it's so closely aligned with aging in the context of inflammation, our friendship, laughter, purpose, downtime, diet, exercise, sleep, and cold water, hormeosis, and I'm going to come on to that in a moment. And what they share in common at a cellular level and at a psychological level is stress. They are ways of de-stressing. Now, acute stress is fine. It's the fight or flight. We're hardwired to have a fight or flight response. It's a good thing. But when we have that, it's expected that we come right down to baseline again after the acute stressful shock. When we have chronic stress, it leads just grumbling away in the background. It leads to chronic inflammation at a cellular level, and that does accelerate aging in the cell through those different theories and pathways we discussed, and impairs our ability to fight infection and other pathogens. It impairs immune responses. So stress is key and very much a core shared pathway for all of these extrinsic factors which influence aging. Rosetta is a lovely example of social engagement. This was an experiment done back in the 1940s by Stephen Wolfe, who was actually a gastroenterologist and had observed the gastric secretions associated with stress, and then took his knowledge and observations there into population health and epidemiological studies. And he was studying Rosetta, where at the time in the States, there was an epidemic of heart disease. It wasn't the case in Rosetta, where men were dying, nearly old men in their 50s. It wasn't the case in Rosetta. They were living 10, 15 years longer than anywhere else in the USA. And he brought his medical student team to Rosetta for a number of consecutive years to try and understand why. And they looked at everything. They looked at diet. They looked at physical activity. They looked at everything we've spoken of. Except one morning he was sitting in the little square in Rosetta. And Rosetta was like an implantation of Italians from a village in Rome now into Pennsylvania. And central church, beautiful, tall houses, families, 3 and 4 generations living in these houses. And after Sunday Mass, they would all gather together in the square and share food and drink and fun and crack. And he was watching what was happening, and it dawned on him. The secret of Rosetta was Rosetta itself. It was its community, its environment, its friendship, its extended families, its constant social engagement. For a village of 2,200 people, they had 1,200 societies. So that's the first time in the sort of scientific literature that we have benchmarked the fact that social engagement matters to biological health. And there have been a number of studies since then, and this is a good meta-analysis which looks at social relationships and death rates, mortality rates, and bottom line shows that of 148 studies, they consistently show a 50% increase in the likelihood of survival due to stronger social relationships. Poor relationships was the same risk for death as smoking, alcohol excess, low physical activity, and high cholesterol. Remarkable. So that's underscoring how important friendships are. And when I'm asked what are the things you need to do, what if you give me the top 3 things with respect to aging, it's quality friendships. And I know my friend Jay West is listening to this now. Hopefully we'll be meeting at the weekend, but quality friendships, physical activity, and diet. And we know that even in animal studies, friendless monkeys, if you biopsy their lymph nodes, the lymph node being the engine for inflammation and immune responses, they've got high inflammatory gene reactivity and low activity in the genes that are supposed to protect us against viruses. Lonely people and people who are socially isolated die early and they're more likely to get Alzheimer's disease and cardiovascular disease. Fact. And even in some human studies in Harvard, they've shown that poorer social contacts are associated with higher fibrinogen levels and, of course, clotting and the consequences of that. What's the diet like in the blue zones? Well, the cornerstone of the centenarian diets in Mediterranean diet, blue zone diet, and in Japan, which lived so much longer than we do, low sugar. And there's no inadvertent inclusion of sugar into products because they don't eat any processed foods or refined foods. Low sugar, low salt, lots of nuts, fruits, pulses, whole grains, vegetables and fish, very little red meat. And if there is red meat, it's sort of an aside, twice a month, for example, in the blue zones. And 80% satiation. They don't finish everything on the plate and push back from the table, remarking, God, I'm full now. Doesn't happen. 80% to fullness. And that takes me on the next thing, which works. We've known for some time that calorie restriction for prolonged periods improves longevity in loads of different species. And these are 2 rhesus monkeys. They're both 20 years old at the time of this photograph. This monkey was fed a standard diet, This monkey a caloric restricted diet. Now, if you look at those two monkeys, you would say this was an older monkey, but it is the same chronological age, the same number, but biologically it's clearly older. Sunken eyes, sunken eyelids, thinner mouth, bigger increased nostrils, drooping mouth, less hair, less fat around the place compared to this much more vicious looking younger monkey. And this is them from the side. That's the normal diet monkey at 20 from the side. And this is the younger biological monkey of 20 chronological years, much more hair, ears up compared to these ears, tail down here, tail up, longer, more physical looking, muscular body, etc. That's with caloric restriction of about 40% for 20 years in dietary intake. And we know now in many species that extended lifespan and age-related diseases are both associated with calorie restriction, including in humans. And the diseases that calorie restriction is beneficial for are diabetes, and you'll all be aware now of this really strict diabetic diet that Roy Taylor in Newcastle described, which reduces or obliviates the need for insulin, cancer, cardiovascular disease, and brain atrophy. All benefit from calorie restriction. These are the sort of diets that have been recommended for us, for humans, to calorie restrict. This is 18 hours of fasting. Now you might think, how would I do 18 hours of fasting a day? I actually do this one. And basically you eat within a 6 to 8 hour window every day. And you finish your eating, say 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, and you don't eat again until 11 or 12 the next morning, the next afternoon. And that gives you your 18 hours of fasting. And we want ketones to increase in the context of calorie restriction, because the ketones increases changes how we use our energy sources. So instead of breaking down glycogen and forming glucose and increasing that in the system, we use fats to create energy and produce ketones. So for the caloric restriction diets, we want to see ketones. This is alternate day fasting, and like that again, you see a ketone rise, which is what you want. And these are the glucose bumps with the 3 meals in the day that you're eating, and you can see ketones right down again. And this is our typical 3 meals plus a late evening snack, no ketones, and bumps all the time in glucose. So there are mimics for caloric restriction. Polyphenols, mimics which influence the mTOR pathways. Resveratrol, that's what we get in the skin of grapes, but you can take it actually as a supplement. And it's worth noting that the studies that have looked at this and shown the benefit for those outcomes I talked about with respect to calorie restriction, actually you require a dose of between 1,000 and 2,000 milligrams compared to what you get in grapes, which is 15. So you have to drink a couple of bottles of wine a day in order to get the equivalent, and one is not recommending that. And these others are, so that one we get in strawberries and other dark fruits, so that can be taken in naturally. The others, that's also a polyphenol, but these are still under investigation. Metformin, it was noted in population studies that type 2 diabetics on metformin actually were less likely to get cancer and some other age-related diseases than others. And there's a large study ongoing now for metformin as an anti-aging agent. And I noted when Donald Trump allegedly had COVID and was admitted to hospital that he was on vitamin D, which absolutely there's very strong circumstantial evidence for its benefit in COVID, and metformin, and he's not a diabetic. So these are the fruits you get your polyphenols in: red grapes, peanuts, prunes, blueberries, cranberries, strawberries, nuts, and some herbs. And finally, I told you about the acute stress, and acute stress is actually good for cells, be it radiation or oxygen excess or an electric shock to a cell or cold water. It's good for us. And actually cold water showers and cold water swimming stress the body so that we get an increase in the sympathetic drive associated with the autonomic response and an increase in cortisol, but then they come right down again afterwards. And there's very, very good evidence at a cellular level, and now more and more with cohort studies, that a cold shower in the morning and cold water swimming is good for immunity and reduces infections. We don't know about its impact as yet on lifespan, but it's certainly at a cellular level doing all the right things that we know are associated with healthy, longer lifespan. I would recommend a cold shower in the morning. And the good news is, from the studies, it doesn't seem to matter how long you stay under the shower, but try and stay for a minute. So I hope I persuaded you that age is not a number, and that we have a duty to ensure that as a society, but as individuals, we do our best to ensure that these environmental factors are implemented for longer life. Thank you.
Well, Roseanne, thank you very much for that absolutely wonderful lecture. And you know, that lecture actually could be, you didn't have to be a doctor to get an awful lot out of that lecture. The Alumni Office informs me that your talk has been viewed worldwide. You know, it's a great number of our graduates come from overseas. And of course, I always continue to view this on an RCSI link. Now, we have 4 questions, Roseanne, and I would be grateful if I could actually just put them to you. You probably have answered most of these questions already in your talk. So the first question I have here is, Tilda has been going for 12 years. What are the main significant findings that have become obvious, and what can we take away from today? This was also to include things like sleep, friends, exercise, supplements.
Okay, so I mean, that's a huge question. You can go on the Tilda website. Even during COVID, we've produced 9 reports since the middle of March this year to help inform policy with respect to COVID, using the Tilda data set and looking at the prevalence of the different risk factors we know make people more susceptible to severity of response to COVID. So that's one response. Let's say sleep, because I haven't touched on sleep. The recommended period of sleep is 7 to 9 hours as at all ages, for adults, adult ages. Now, if we don't get a minimum of 7 and less than 9, between 7 and 9 hours, we have shown in Tilda that there's an influence on mental health, mood and anxiety, depression and anxiety, but also on cognitive function. So those who are out with that window, either getting less than 7 or more than 9, get a more accelerated cognitive decline in mental function tests. That's the one thing with sleep. The other big thing we've shown actually is how important social engagement is. And interestingly, possibly your friends are more important than family. That's because you can choose friends. And if a friendship or a relationship with friends becomes a bit strained, you can walk away from it. You don't have to endure the stress associated with that. But if with respect to family, it's very difficult to walk away with family, and it's not uncommon to have stress within relationships within families. So that was another thing that we showed. From the cardiovascular perspective, which is my area, we've shown that actually drops in blood pressure when people stand, particularly over the age of 70, hugely impact on frequency of falls, blackouts, but also injurious falls and fractures over the next 4 to 6 years, and cognitive decline. So cognitive decline is accelerated if standing blood pressure doesn't return to baseline level within 40 seconds. And we've also in the study been measuring brain blood flow using infrared spectroscopy and shown that those cohorts have a less stable cerebral perfusion and autoregulation. So traditionally, we've measured blood pressure with an oscilloscope, just the traditional, regular measurement way. We use beat-to-beat blood pressure measures and peripheral resistance and cardiac output measures, etc. And we've shown that actually the changes in blood pressure that influence brain function and bodily function as we get older are much more subtle. And if you haven't restored standing blood pressure by 40 seconds, in 4 years' time, you're much more at risk of have had injurious falls, mood changes, or cognitive impairment. Another really interesting thing we've shown, and this is with our colleagues in RCSI, is that how you perceive yourself aging actually influences your physical and cognitive age. So we ask them participants about how old do you feel? Do you feel 60, and if not, what age do you feel, etc. And people who feel younger say they feel younger, who are followed on then for 8 to 10 years, adjusted for all other confounders, independently, how you perceived yourself 8 years before determines how fast you walk, how many illnesses you get in the interim, etc., your mood. So there's something about perception of aging, and that, Paddy, is really important in the context of COVID and the ageist approaches we've had worldwide in the media and with policy in the context of marginalization of people because of an age, a number, a chronological number.
Okay, Roseanne, I see here, like in August 2019, there was an article in the Irish Times on pets. It was mostly about dogs. And they concluded that there was significant health benefits were bestowed on their owners. I believe actually that the research is part of your Tilda project, Dr. Orla Donoghue. What are the most obvious benefits from having pets? Is this just part,
Yeah. So if we have a way of looking at stress levels using, believe it or not, hair samples to measure cortisol, and it measures stress over the previous 3 months. So that's a biological measure of stress. And we've also done blood biomarkers for different stress measures and also autonomic function tests. Having a pet reduces the autonomic function, it enhances vagal activity, reduces sympathetic activity, reduces cortisols, reduces overall heart rate responses. And we've looked at heart rate variability, and it enhances the what we call high frequency heart rate, which is a measure again of vagal parasympathetic activity, and reduces sympathetic activity. So pets make a difference to autonomic function or stress function, and also mental health changes like depression and anxiety. I can't hear you, Patty.
You've done remarkably well so far. This is your final question, and this is for €1 billion. You still have 2 lifelines, and you can always phone a friend. Vitamin D.
Yeah.
It appears to have profound effects in the health of the aged. It is also mentioned in COVID assistance. Should it be mandatory in food supplements in Ireland, similar to iodine in bread? And I know it is actually mandatory in some other countries.
Wow, that's a great question, and one that's really close to my heart at the moment. Okay, so first of all, in the context of the current pandemic, there is very strong circumstantial evidence and evolving randomized controlled trial evidence that vitamin D reduces the severity of the response. It reduces the likelihood of being admitted to ITU with COVID 7-fold. So that's the first thing to be said. Secondly, the levels of vitamin D that are required to have that impact are not deficient, but rather insufficient. So deficiency is less than 30 nanomoles per litre. Insufficiency is less than 50. So levels of 50 and above seem to be necessary to have that protective effect. And to get those levels, we require an intake of 800 to 1,000 international units a day. Now, the current recommendation up until a week ago was 400 international units. The government in Ireland have increased it to 600. I'll say it here now. I don't understand why they picked that figure, because there's no evidence for 600 in the context of what I've just shared with you. It's 800 or 1,000. But they have increased it somewhat. We've had great traction. I've worked with colleagues in the UK in getting recommendations there, which are the appropriate level of recommendation for people who are considered at risk of more severe COVID. But in Ireland, 43% of us, because of our latitude, have insufficient vitamin D in our circulation in winter and in spring. 43% over 50, mean age 64. So that's half the population. And right now we can't afford to do vitamin D levels on everybody. So there is no harm in taking vitamin D up to 4,000 international units. And at least the Irish recent policy acknowledged that. So I strongly recommend in this current context, but generally speaking, that people take 800 to 1,000 international units a day. And with respect to supplementation, when we've looked at countries where they have not supplementation, but fortification, like Finland, they had low mortality rates. Certainly in the first wave where we did most of this analysis. Believe it or not, Bologna and north of Spain or Italy rather, had very high levels of insufficiency and deficiency, as had many other hot countries where people cover up a lot. So don't assume because and dark skin also reduces levels. So I've done some interviews for Al Jazeera television on this, emphasizing that if you wear clothing which covers you, then you are very likely, no matter what your age, to be deficient. In Ireland, 18 to 39-year-olds, nearly 20% had insufficiency or deficiency. So that's my answer to vitamin D. Great topic, hot topic, and I hope everybody tomorrow morning is going to hit the supplements.
Okay. Okay, Roseanne. Roseanne, thank you very much. You know, normally at this stage, we would normally adjourn to the boardroom, you know, to have a dinner. But actually, having seen those two Regis monkeys, I actually think we'll embark upon calorific restrictions on the whole lot. So I would just simply now, just in conclusion, I would like to thank, you know, all of those who visited and who listened to your lecture, Roseanne. I would like to thank the committee again for their commitment and the hard work now and throughout the year. I'd also like to mention Frank Donegan, the head porter. We saw him in the slide earlier on. And again, I'd like to mention the Alumni Office. They did sterling work in putting this presentation together. Kiva O'Neill and Sherlock, excellent professional job. And also to you, Roseanne, and thank you for being a personal friend. Slán agus fanacht. Margaret.